That's called carding, and I'm carding the wool to get it ready to spin. After you got to shear the sheep, and that was with hand shears at that point in time. And then you would have to wash the wool because the sheep has been running around in his coat all year. And then after that, it's clumped together. And in order to do the carding step, you would have everybody in the family that was available doing what was called teasing the wool. That means pulling it out of the locks, and this was also a cleaning process because it would often release weed seeds that were caught in the sheep's fleece. And then hand cards are a lot like dog combs. They have flexible metal teeth, and they, in the old days, they were set in leather. Now they're set in rubberized plastic, but they used to be set in leather. Now the whole idea here is to get an even arrangement of wool so you can make a more consistent yarn. And I'm not pressing down in the cards. The idea is to keep the card wool on the surface of the cards. And so I'm brushing for a little while that way, and then I'm going to turn it over and brush up and brush again, and then turn it over again. And what I'm doing is making an even arrangement of wool and air, and that will allow me to make a better quality yarn. Now I'm going to brush up and brush down. And now I've made what's called a bat, and people would make bats like this using cotton to make the batting for quilts, or sometimes they would use wool batting for what we called a comforter. It didn't have as much quilting on it. But you want to save that arrangement now and keep it so that it doesn't get tangled before you spin. So one way or the other, you're going to roll it up into what was called a roll. And you would make hundreds and hundreds of these before you ever sat down to spin. The spinning would not take very much time compared to all the rest of the shearing of the sheep and the washing of the wool and the carding and the teasing and all that. So I wouldn't just make one and spin one. Usually I'd make hundreds, but you don't want to wait that long. I'm adding twist to this wool. I am spinning a yarn. All a spinning wheel is a twisting machine, and I'm using fibers that I have hand carded and rolled into a roll. And so I am making a yarn with the help of my spinning wheel. This is the drive wheel, and I'm treadling it with my foot, and every time that it goes around, because of the drive band here, it's turning two things. And this is not two drive bands. It's one drive band that's doubled over. One part of the drive band is driving this spool or bobbin that is winding up my finished yarn. And there is a rod that this spool is riding on, and that rod connects this part and this horseshoe-shaped part, which is called a flyer. This controls my speed, and this will control the twist. Every time that this flyer goes around, because the yarn is threaded through the front of it, it puts a turn of twist into the yarn that I'm making. And that twist is coming up my yarn into my fiber supply, and that enables me with a little twist in it to pull my fibers out to the size that I want my yarn to be, and then I let it wind on. Now it's time to add another roll, which I've carded, and you don't have to make a knot. You just tie the ends together, not tie, just lay the ends together, and add a little twist, and you have made a join. Now here comes the twist, and I let a little twist I can draw out to the size I want my yarn to be. Add several extra treadles of twist and let it run on. Now you're not going to even be finished with this process when you have your bobbin full. When the yarn is on the bobbin, it's under tension and it won't untwist. But if you're going to use it for something like knitting or crochet and not directly weave it from the bobbin into the weaving shuttle, then you're going to have to set the twist. So you would use some sort of yarn winder. This is a handheld one that's called a nitty-notty, and make what we call a skein. A skein is just a circular arrangement of the yarn. This is the skein. And you'd make that skein wet, and then you'd hang it with a weight on it, and that would set the twist. And then it would be ready to go on and knit. Now, if you want to color, then you can dye it now after you've spun it, or else you can dye the fleece, and that's called dyeing it in the wool, and you've probably heard that expression used for other things. Dyed in the wool. Okay, this is a more primitive machine. This in the history of spinning wheels. This type of spinning wheel was first seen in a diagram in a spinning book of about 1480s. And it was not invented all at once. It was an invention that grew from all previous inventions. But this, again, is a twisting machine. And this kind of spinning wheel developed from the hand spindle. A hand spindle, again, is a twisting machine because every time you turn that twist will come up into the fibers as you draw them out. And once you have reached the end of your fiber supply or added as much twist as you want, then you have to stop the twisting and back up and wind it on. Now someone, and we don't know for sure when or where, probably in China or India, got a bright idea. If you turn that on its side, and instead of turning it with your finger, turned it with a big wheel, then you're still going to get that spinning off the tip, but it's going to go a lot faster because a big wheel driving a small wheel is going to make that small wheel go very fast. Now again, I'm not going to tie a knot. I'm going to lay the ends together and add a little twist. Now this wheel, you're getting the twist right here at the spindle tip. Now it's very important that this drive band be lined up with the spindle, and if it wiggles a little and comes out of alignment, then it's going to throw the band. And this is an old character, so we'll hope it will behave. Now each flip off the tip there is making a turn of twist come into my yarn. Oops, it came off. I'm sorry. Let's get it lined up. We're getting a little moisture in the air, and that's making some things absorb moisture. So there's behaving. Okay, back to the story. Now each flip there is a turn of twist, and you have to stop because if you're going to take care of slubs and bumps. Now, after I have drawn out as much as I want to, then I'm adding extra twist to make it stronger, and then I still have to wind it up, so I have to back up and wind it on. Come down to the tip and start drafting out. Draft it to the size that you want your yarn to be.
So what is that?
This is called a great wheel, or a wool wheel, or a high wheel, and it was probably the most common one for use in the mountains because it fit the fibers that were used here for the most part, the shorter wools and cotton. And also, if you knew somebody that could make a wheel that ran true, then you were really in business. You didn't have to have fancy turn parts. It could be very plain, so just as long as it ran true. And the blacksmith could make a spindle for you without any problem, and it's mounted just in a couple pieces of leather. So this could be a homemade job. It didn't have to be fancy at all.
Thank you.
You're welcome.